Hi, I'm Mr. Hartwig.
And I'm Mr. Chen. Today we'll be talking about the kidney. We heard from one of our students that on the actual IB test, the kidney showed up on paper too, and many were unprepared for it. In fact, I think you even tried to tackle that question, Mr. Hartwig.
I did, yes. It was a 5-point question, and it asked about how the kidney circulates water when the body is dehydrated.
How'd that go for you?
It wasn't great because I wasn't prepared at all, and that's kind of our inspiration for this video, actually.
All right, so let's get started. Tell us where the kidney is located first.
Okay, yeah, so the kidney is located below the rib cage, and you have one kidney on each side of your spine. And the kidney consists of the cortex, the renal pelvis, the renal artery, renal vein, medulla, and ureter. So let's dive into what the main functions of the kidneys are.
Right. So something that we figured out was that the kidney is actually connected to the bladder, and urine is produced by the kidneys via the blood, which is filtered through those kidneys. But how is that actually done?
Okay, yeah. So kidneys contain a lot of what are called nephrons, and kidneys have about 1 million nephrons, and these nephrons break down, filtrate from the bloodstream into either urine or they send them back into the bloodstream. And so each nephron has two sections.
Right. The first section of the nephron is called the
glomerulus.
Glomerulus, which is a specialized mass of capillaries that filter the blood. Each one is surrounded by the Bowman's capsule. The blood pressure forces fluid from the blood of the glomerulus into the Bowman's capsule.
And remember, some filtrate will be reabsorbed out of the nephron back into the interstitial fluid.
Right. In the nephron, all types of movement is used for the ions. There's diffusion, facilitated, and active transport. When talking about the actual ions, we actually assembled this little diagram of all the ions that are used in this process. So we can see here ions that will eventually be reabsorbed is NaCl, which is just sodium. We have water, glucose, amino acids, potassium, and bicarbonate. And by reabsorbed, we're not talking about absorption into the actual nephron. We're talking about absorption into the
interstitial fluid.
Right. And in the same way, secretion would include hydrogen, ammonium, and potassium as well. And this secretion would just be everything from the interstitial fluid into the actual nephron. So it's a little bit confusing in the way terminology-wise, but that is basically the general idea. The interstitial fluid is just anything that is around the nephron. The actual nephron here is all the tubes here.
Exactly. So now let's talk about the second section of the nephron, which is the tubule itself, this whole long part here. And so after the glomerulus, which is the head, so to speak, filtrate travels to the proximal tubule, which helps with pH regulation in the body.
Right. So in the actual proximal tube, which is around here, right before this huge chunk, it kind of reabsorbs everything. By everything, I mean everything listed here. So the sodium, amino acid, water, potassium, the glucose, and the bicarbonate. Everything gets reabsorbed by the interstitial fluid, basically getting sucked out of the filtrate and getting sucked out of the nephron. And in the same process, it also secretes hydrogen and ammonium. This is again based on the actual interstitial fluid. Basically, secretion means it's actually going into the nephron, not going out of the nephron.
Exactly. So after the proximal tubule, we have the loop of Henle, which is this big sort of U shape here. And so in the loop of Henle, water travels back into the interstitial fluid, which is outside of the nephron, and this is via osmosis. In the bottom of the loop of Henle here, NaCl, or salt, diffuses out into interstitial fluid as it follows a concentration gradient.
Right. And from what we did research on, a person who drinks more water, in their urine, it will contain, their urine will be more dilute. Basically, it will have more water, of course. This is specifically because of the fact that when water is actually reabsorbed into the interstitial fluid through the Henle tube, it will leave water inside of these inside of the filtrate, going all the way through the rest of the nephron and eventually into your urine.
Yeah. So after the loop of Henle here, we meet the distal convoluted tube, and here, this is where a ton of ions basically just return back to the interstitial fluid. This process happens of absorption and secretion. It happens all throughout the tubule, but that's sort of a main aspect of the distal convoluted tubule.
Right. As Mr. Hartwig said, everything gets reabsorbed here. And one final thing when talking about the kidney that must be mentioned is that a lot of the times when kidney failure happens, or just anything revolving around the kidney problems happen, it is usually because a person doesn't drink enough water or has trouble processing that kind of water. And so a way to combat this that that people have found is that we can use diuretics, which is basically a kind of medicine that substitutes for water. In a way, it will act as water in the start here around the
Glomerulus.
right, around the glomerulus. And because of that, we will end up with more water in your urine, and thus also meaning that there will be more water reabsorbed into the interstitial fluid, meaning that you'll have more water for your body. That is why diuretics are important, and how to actually a method to solve a lot of kidney problems.
That's right. Thank you, Mr. Chen.
Of course.
That's all we have for today on the basics of the kidney. Make sure to stay tuned for more videos on biology in the future.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, guys.